Did you know that only 10% of engineers in the United States are licensed professional engineers? It's a surprising statistic, especially given the significant impact PE license can have on advancing one's engineering career. Becoming a licensed engineer is a significant milestone in the engineering profession. It's a badge of honor, and it demonstrates your expertise, your commitment, and dedication to your field. And let me tell you something, it's a game changer when it comes to career advancement. I saw that in my own career. In today's episode of Pass the PE Exam, I'm joined by Madison Anderson. Madison is a licensed professional engineer and transportation engineer at Stanley Consultant, and she's going to share her journey to becoming a professional engineer. She's going to provide insights into what motivated her to pursue her PE license, how it has shaped her career, and also provide some key tips, and I think they're game changers, for preparing for your exam. So whether you're just starting or you've been preparing for your exam, stay tuned for some valuable insights into preparation for the PE exam. But first, a word from our sponsor.
PPI provides expert prep courses and study resources designed to help you pass the PE exam the first time. PPI's live online courses include hours of lectures, problem-solving demonstrations, exam strategy sessions, office hours, and a passing guarantee. When you take a live online course, PPI guarantees you will pass, or you can take the on-demand course for free. With study guides, practice exams, and more, the PPI Learning Hub offers digital practice and review that you can take with you anywhere you have a device so that you can prepare during the times most convenient for you. Check out PPI today at ppi2pass.com to see all the options available for PE exam prep. Let's dive in.
All right, now I'd like to welcome our guest onto the show for today. Madison Anderson is a transportation engineer at Stanley Consultants, and Madison actually took the exam back in 2022, but because she's in Illinois where the exam is decoupled and you could take it before you have all your work experience, she received her license actually this year in 2024, just recently. So Madison, welcome to Pass the PE Exam and congrats on getting your license.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, and we're excited to talk a little bit about your journey. And let's kind of start there, Madison. Maybe you can start by telling us about yourself, what you do at Stanley, and what kind of motivated you to get your PE license.
For sure. So like you mentioned, I am a professional engineer in the state of Illinois and just recently. And at Stanley, I really kind of specialize in design engineering with urban and suburban roadways. So kind of roadway is my bread and butter. I earned my bachelor's degree at Colorado School of Mines out in Golden, and I'm actually in pursuit of my master's degree right now. Supposed to get it in December if all goes as well, in transportation engineering from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. So I think really my passion for getting licensed really kind of came out in undergrad. I knew I really just wanted to pursue the license then. And it was really because in large part, I was just motivated by career growth, advancement opportunities, as well as just taking on more responsibility and leadership roles on projects. And kind of that PE licensure is a big stepping stone in that. Plus, I think it's the coolest thing just to have a stamp with your name on it. Obviously, that does come with a lot of responsibility, but I still think I brag about having a physical stamp, and that I'll use it to sign some letters to my family and all, just because I think it's so cool.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, and before we dive in, and we're going to dive into some of that stuff in more detail with Madison, but I do just want to reinforce for those that might be confused from what I said earlier, if you're not familiar with the decoupling term or what it means, in a lot of states in the United States, in order to get your PE license, you have to take your FE exam, the fundamentals exam, work for 3 or 4 years as a practicing engineer, and then you'll get approved by your state to sit for the PE exam, essentially. And then you pass that, and when you put all those three things together, you get your license. However, in some states, Illinois, I think Texas is another one, if I'm pretty sure about that. You can, let's say, graduate. You can take the FE exam, pass it. Soon after that, you can take the PE exam, pass it. But then you still need to get that work experience after you've taken the 2 exams. It just allows you to take the exams earlier. So you still have to add those 3 things together to get your license. You could just do it in a different order. So that's why, just to set that up for everybody that maybe is not familiar with that process. All right. So Madison, in your opinion, what are the key steps engineers should follow when they're preparing for their PE exam based on your experience?
Yeah, I think the first one is really understand the exam format and the topics that it will cover. I know NCEES has a great resource that really breaks down the topics that are covered, as well as kind of approximately how many questions from each topic will be on the exam. So I think knowing that will help really guide the studying efforts as well as just working problems. I think that's probably the biggest one, is just working problems. And then if you come across a problem that you don't understand, maybe supplementing that with some YouTube videos or concept review as needed. I think just half the battle is really getting back into the mindset of studying and remembering just how to take a test and how to prep for a test. So starting is half the battle. And I think just expecting at first, the progress most likely will be pretty slow. Knowing that you're getting back into the swing of things, trying to work problems again. Maybe you've been out of school for a little bit. So that environment or just working a bunch of problems isn't as day-to-day task. But I think the concepts will slowly start to come back to you. You'll kind of build that confidence. And then I'd say like the last thing is just really try to have a study plan, and try to stick to it as best you can. It's definitely okay to still take breaks. You're still a person. You're still living life. And just kind of having that mentality that studying is a marathon. It's definitely not a sprint. Kind of take a long-term view and approach to it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think one way that you could say that is be an engineer, right? Look at the specs of the test, get into the details, understand the types of problems, the number of problems, the format of the exam. That's a big part of being able to get comfortable, is knowing kind of what you're up against. I think that's really important. And I think, to Madison's point, having a study plan is really important. Looking at the date of the exam and getting a feel for how many hours you want to study each week and making sure you have enough time to do that and kind of putting it on your calendar. I think that's really important. I mean, I think we all have a million things on our calendar, from work stuff, personal stuff, but we have to get our study preparation time on the calendar as well. I mean, if we're going to do it and if we're going to really be dedicated to it and put the time in that we need to. So I think that that's a really good approach. So Madison, a lot of engineers go through this process and they run into a lot of challenges when they're preparing for the exam. What are some of the challenges that you encountered during your PE exam process, and how did you overcome that?
I think the biggest one for me was definitely the anxiety that came with studying or just prepping for the exam. There were definitely times when I would be working a practice problem and be very stumped and just get anxious that I didn't know the answer. And then I was like, well, maybe I'm not smart enough, or going down this kind of vicious cycle, and then kind of stumbling upon the thought that, oh, I'm going to fail, which again, if you can take the exam multiple times, if you do fail, that kind of reframing that statement really helped me just kind of put things in perspective. Like, it's not the end all be all on this one exam. And then if there was a problem, when there was a problem I was stumped on, I would generally try to walk away, take a little break, refresh. Sometimes that break was 10 minutes. Other times I didn't pick up studying until the next day, just kind of depending on how I was feeling. I think just knowing some of those cues and how you operate is definitely beneficial. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges, is just overcoming the anxiety. And then I think the other one is just the time management, like you mentioned. There were a couple times that I had to opt out of some fun social events with friends, but those were generally few and far between, because I did have a study plan in place, kind of had a routine down where most of my studying would happen on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday when I wasn't traveling into the office. So that way I had 2 extra hours to study and to dedicate to that. And I wasn't nearly as tired. So just figuring out those when studying works best for you is definitely, I would say, a key point, and definitely can help overcome the challenge of time management and figuring out where studying will fit in with all of the responsibilities that come with life.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, if you may miss, like you said, a social event here or there, but I think if it's for this investment in yourself, that's a one-time investment over a 6-month period that's going to return itself on a license that's going to, help you for the rest of your career. It's going to be worth a couple of sacrifices along the way. And, I really like what you said about the problems and really thinking about your mindset is that, you're not going to get every problem right when you're studying. There's going to be some really challenging ones, but you have to come up with an approach to, how are you going to deal with that, right? Like you said, maybe it's a break for an hour, maybe it's a break for 10 minutes, maybe it's a break for a day. It depends on probably how you're feeling about it, probably depends on how far along you are in your study practice. Like I would imagine the further you get, you'll be better to maybe navigate some of those challenges because you've seen a lot more problems and you're getting used to it. But I definitely think that anytime you take on a challenge like this in your career, an exam of this magnitude, it's going to require you to have a strong mindset and build your confidence up. And starting, I think, small, right? Learning some small problems, getting a study plan in place, showing up every day and sitting down at the table is all going to start to build your confidence up, which can really help you. I think another thing that can help you, of course, for engineers is their employers. And I'm just curious as to how Stanley Consultants kind of assisted you or supported you along your PE journey.
Yeah, I think I looked first and foremost to a lot of my colleagues. They were super supportive and sharing their experience with the exam, giving some tips and tricks, study materials. So I think just really the people at Stanley were super supportive. It almost felt like I was bringing their support with me into the exam room when I took the exam. And then Stanley gives you the test day off, which is really nice. Just knowing that I didn't have to take PTO, or it's like I'd rather spend that on a vacation rather than taking an exam. So it is really nice just having that flexibility and that support from Stanley.
That's nice. Yeah, taking it on a vacation that you'll need after the exam.
Exactly.
No, it is nice to have that support from your employer. And like you said, not just, of course, the support of the day off, for example, is great. But then also just knowing that they're supporting you, they're behind you, they're promoting you to go do this thing that's important in your career. And I think what you said is also really important, which is knowledge sharing, right? Which is that there's other people in Stanley and there are pathways to be able to communicate with them about the exam. How did it go? Even back to the application. I need some help with my PE application, exam application, or whatever the case may be. I think that's a great resource for those of you that are currently working and studying for your PE exam, because you've got people within your organization that have, of course, passed the exam before, and they can help you. And some of them maybe passed it recently and they've taken the computer-based exam or similar discipline to you. And so, that advice can really save you a lot in terms of your study preparation and just give you some heads up on what maybe are the best areas to focus on your efforts. So, Madison, what are some specific strategies or resources or study materials maybe that helped you the most in preparing for your PE exam? What really worked for you?
Yeah, a kind of recurring theme is definitely practice problems. At least for me, I definitely think that was super, super helpful. I got some of those practice problems through a former colleague of mine. She was kind enough to share all of her study materials with me. So I really used that to my advantage. And this was actually kind of before I think ChatGPT got really big. And actually one of our younger engineers who's studying for the exam right now is using ChatGPT to create practice problems and have, I thought that was such a great idea and wish I had that available when I was studying. I was like, man. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do a whole video series here on that.
Yeah, I think it would be it's a fantastic resource, especially for studying. And then I think another big resource was the NCEES exam reference handbook that they provide, and the equations in there, as well as just having the other manuals that are available on the exam while I was practicing those practice problems really got me kind of familiar on where to look, which which was super helpful. And then I think one of the other kind of strategies I would say is try to refine or practice the skill of searching for different terms, because now on the computer-based exam, you have Control F as a function, which is super helpful. But there's a skill, I think, in searching for certain terms that will return what you want it to return. So like the term pedestrian or road is going to return so many different searches that you just won't have time to go through. But there's a skill associated with which words you select. So I think just practicing that is be definitely beneficial when you take the exam.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It goes back to what we talked about before, which is, being an engineer and understanding the specifications of the exam, knowing that the Control F is available. You can search for things, but what's the best process for searching for things? Because like you said, if it's a common term, there's going to be a million of them. So how do you weed through that? And again, it's just like any time you play a game, if you know the rules, the odds of you winning are going to be better because you understand all the rules and everything that you're allowed to do and how to can figure out how to do it efficiently. And so I think really thinking through that, depending on the discipline you're taking, looking at the types of problems, your setup is going to be really important for how you can kind of tackle the exam. And I think Madison's 100% right in terms of just being able to find information on the exam, getting familiar with the manuals. I mean, your biggest opponent with this exam is time. You're up against the clock, right? Even if you know everything and can answer every problem correctly, if you can't do it in enough time, that knowledge doesn't matter anymore, because you're not going to get those questions right. So one part of your preparation is understanding the materials, but the other part of your preparation is being able to then answer those problems in a short amount of time. And I think that that's something that you always need to keep in mind with the PE exam. So, Madison, what are some maybe common pitfalls or mistakes that engineers make that you've seen when they're preparing for the PE exam, and some things they could do to avoid these mistakes?
Yeah, I think a mistake that I made when I was practicing was not per se replicating the exam like conditions when I was studying, especially closer to the exam. So I had 3 monitors while I was studying, one with a resource, one with practice problems, had a big desk. That was not the environment that I took the test in. I had one screen. So I think just knowing the specifications, what the exam is going to be like when you get into the room, and trying to replicate that environment while you're studying would be super beneficial. And then also just not placing as much emphasis on memorization, but just really understanding the principles and concepts kind of behind the formulas, and then also knowing where to look, because we all have a certain limit of retention of the equations. You are smarter than you know going into the exam. It's just a matter of if you can find the reference or the equation that you need, that will be super beneficial, but don't put too much emphasis on memorizing every single equation that you think you'll need, because you do have those references. So use those to your advantage and don't feel the pressure to remember every single thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I actually think that that's one of the benefits of maybe taking the exam after you've had some years of experience, is that, if you're taking a transportation discipline, the transportation exam in the afternoon, let's say, a lot of that stuff, maybe because you worked on it, you're not just relying on the equations. You understand, how you do a curve equation or why you do it, and you could break it down a little bit more, because I do think that's important. Because if you're going to just bank on memorizing all these formulas, the odds of you passing are going to be lower. But if you understand, when you look at a problem, how to think through it, the odds of you getting that problem correct, even if you can't remember the exact equation or where to find it, you can think through it and figure it out. So I definitely think that that's a positive. And then the other thing that Madison said, I agree, is probably the biggest pitfall, is people don't put themselves under testing conditions when they're studying. In fact, I had once interviewed a minor league baseball player who is now a professional engineer, and he was talking about this, how even in sports, if you just practice and then go to the game, it's a completely different situation, right? Because in practice, there's no pressure, right? So anytime you can put yourself in a game-like situation, it's going to help you to be better equipped for the actual game time. It's the same thing with an exam. If you're just doing your problems, you're not timing yourself, like Madison gave the example, maybe using more monitors than you're going to have in the exam. When you get into the exam, that's not what you're going to have available. You're not going to have that unlimited time. You're not going to have all those different resources. So you really need to maybe have an area in your house where you can go, you can set it up, have a timer, put yourself under those conditions, especially I would say in the last 2 to 4 weeks of your studying where you're really getting close to the exam. And, even a couple of weeks before, I would take a full exam, a full practice exam, spend a whole day on a Saturday, which I know doesn't sound great, but go through the whole exam so that when you get there for the actual exam, it's not like the first time that you've done that. And I think that that can be really beneficial for you. All right. So now that you've earned your PE license, Madison, do you feel that in any way it's kind of enhanced your skills as an engineer, or has it primarily just kind of maybe served to boost your confidence in some of your abilities as an engineer? How has it made you feel or helped you post-exam?
Yeah, I think with earning my PE license, it's definitely boosted my confidence, some in my ability, I would say. I definitely know I have room to still learn and grow as an engineer, but I think it's nice knowing that I've been able to reach a certain benchmark and the ability kind of associated with that benchmark that is recognized throughout the industry. And I think that has kind of just having that credential just kind of makes me walk a little taller, head held a little higher. It is a source of pride, but I also recognize the responsibility that comes with it, right? Like
Sure.
At the end of the day, you're wanting to put the health and safety and welfare of the public, hold that paramount. And so it's great. I think it's boosted my confidence, but I think there's the balance too, right? There's more responsibility that comes with earning that license.
Yeah, for sure. And, I will say, just from doing a lot of work with engineers and their careers over the years, I think one of the most important aspects or one of the most important things to help you develop your career is confidence. So I do think getting your license can give you a tremendous amount of confidence, which can really help you in all other areas of your career. And so I think that's a huge positive. And, I hope that if you're listening to this and you're up in the air about getting your license, you really will go for it. I know it's a commitment to study for it and prepare for it, but there are lots of benefits to it that we covered today. I mean, confidence, I'm sure other benefits that we didn't cover, like the ability to get promoted, your earning power, and all those other things are going to increase with your license. And so Madison, in terms of being licensed in other states, have you considered that? Do you know anything about how that works or challenges associated with that? Maybe you can talk about licensing in multiple states for whatever you can offer on that would be great.
Yeah, I have definitely thought about getting licensed in another state beyond Illinois, since I do live in Wisconsin, but I work in Illinois. Wisconsin probably will be up there. It is kind of dependent on where there is need for projects and the projects that Stanley does and works on. But despite that, I think just knowing that each state does have its own licensing board and requirements. Some states offer reciprocity or have comity agreements, basically, which means they'll accept other states' licenses with similar requirements. So I don't currently have any practice of kind of going through the process or getting licensed in another state, at least not yet. But I think from what I've gathered from some of my colleagues, I think one of the bigger challenges is just managing the different requirements and deadlines for renewal. And in order to keep up with the license, each state does it maybe slightly different. So I think just keeping up with that and knowing those can be a challenge, but there are resources out there that can definitely help you manage those too.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I think if you're not familiar with that term reciprocity, it means that you're able to get licensure in other states outside of the state that you took the exam, dependent on the other state's requirements. As Madison said, each state kind of has their own licensing board that dictates that. For example, I took my exam in New York. I was licensed in New York, and then I applied for reciprocity into New Jersey to get my license. I had to go through an application process. I also had to complete, I think it was like a 10 or 15 question legal exam on some of the legal laws of like engineering and surveying in New Jersey that were, I guess, slightly different than New York. And it was a take-home thing. It wasn't like you go somewhere and take it. But again, just an example that there are different ways of doing it. And then, of course, you're going to have those renewal fees and a process in each of the states, like Madison referenced. And some states require you to get continuing education. Some states don't, or the amount of continuing education can be different. And again, like Madison said, there are some tools out there that can help you manage that stuff. And some organizations even help you manage that stuff depending on the company you work for, because obviously they want to keep everyone up on their licenses and things of that nature. But I do think it can provide a benefit, obviously, if you do work in multiple states, or as Madison said, there are opportunities in other states where work can be done. So Madison, one last question I have for you is just any final advice that you can give to engineers that are maybe just starting out on their journey towards PE license?
Yeah, I think definitely starting early. It's definitely hard getting back into the swing of studying when you're removed from that environment for so long. So I think if you can take it before you achieve the 4 years of experience, then by all means do. I definitely think that's beneficial. And then just staying consistent and don't be afraid to ask for help. The PE exam process can be long and a challenging journey, but it is so rewarding once you get that license. Once you get that mark, I passed the exam. There is a lot of joy and pride with that. And then just remember, I would say, to believe in yourself, keep pushing forward. In the wise words of Winnie the Pooh, you are smarter than you think. That was definitely a go-to saying of mine. And just remember that you got this.
Yeah, that's great. And it is something that once you get it, you have it, and it's worth the effort and the energy that you put into it, because it can really help you, in your career for the long term. And just one last thing, just building on what Madison said about starting early. One thing too to keep in mind is that when you do the application for your PE exam, they're going to ask you for all of your experience. So I always like to keep a track of my experience as I went through my career. I think I had a Word document or a spreadsheet or something. So it's good for you to keep track of the projects you worked on. In some states, they ask you for the specific projects, and they might ask your specific supervisor to sign off on you for those projects in your exam process. So just having a list of the projects you worked on, kind of a professional resume, and your supervisor on those projects, especially if you move to another company and you need to get in touch with that person, can also be really important in your process. So that's something just to keep in mind. So once again, Madison Anderson, transportation engineer at Stanley Consultants, thank you so much for spending some time with us here on Pass the PE Exam. I hope you found this week's video helpful. In upcoming videos, I will solve some more PE exam practice problems and answer other questions from our subscribers. Pass the PE exam videos will be published weekly, so please be sure to click that subscribe button so you don't miss something that could make a substantial difference, not just in your exam result, but in your engineering career long term. And please ask questions and leave comments below this video, and I will respond to you. Let me know if there's a topic that you want me to cover or a question that you need answered. Pass the PE exam will have you covered. I'll see you next week on Pass the PE Exam.